was great. I love that standing ovation thing. That killed me. It's with great honor that I introduce our keynote speaker to you today, a serial entrepreneur, an entrepreneur's entrepreneur. Mike Levy is the founder and former CEO of SportsLine.com, now CBSSports.com, a leading sports media company which published CBSSportsLine.com, NFL.com, PGA Tour.com, and NCAA Sports.com. I guess they're fond of TLAs, three-letter acronyms. But I don't know how that NCAA got in there. It's 4 letters, the acronym. Mr. Levy took SportsLine public in 1997, raising $32 million. In 1998, SportsLine raised $150 million in a secondary offering, and in 1999, raised $150 million in a convertible bond offering. During the internet boom years from 1998 to early 2000, SportsLine's market cap routinely exceeded $1 billion. In 1998, Mr. Levy was featured in a Forbes cover story with several other internet company founders. He is also the subject of numerous articles in Fortune, Businessweek, and Forbes, and was a frequent guest on CNBC, Bloomberg, and CNN, and an invited speaker at high-profile internet and media conferences. Previous to starting SportsLine, Mr. Levy was CEO of Open Sports Network and CEO of Lexicon Corporation, where he did other technology kinds of offerings. Mr. Levy holds 6 patents for innovative high-tech products and received his Bachelor of Electrical Engineering degree from Georgia Tech in 1969. Mr. Levy is also the recipient of numerous awards, including the Florida Entrepreneur of the Year Award by Ernst & Young. So help me give him a very warm South Florida welcome, Mike Levy.
Thanks, I needed more than one clap. Thanks very much, Mason. Well, I thought I'd start out with put on my Google Glass so I could videotape all of you, but you know, there's not enough time to get a release from everybody. It's really an honor to be here. It's great to talk to you. I'm sure that several of you are going to come up with some things that are going to really be successful in the future, and I think that this is the right way to go about starting. Crazy things are happening in the market today. Look at WhatsApp. They just sold for $19 billion to Facebook. What's really remarkable is that Facebook is only 10 years old itself. To come up with a $19 billion buyout offer is pretty amazing. If you look at what they were able to do at Facebook, starting, I don't know if any of you watched the movie Social Network, but it was pretty interesting and you could actually learn a little bit from it. Google is the second most valuable company on the market today. Or they find it out with Exxon. Apple's #1, Google's 2. Google was started back in 1998. And I actually met the founders way back then because their venture capital backer, Kleiner Perkins, was the same as ours. So, you know, I got to meet them way back and never would have thought that they would do what they did. They raised only a total of $25 million of venture capital and built a company that's worth hundreds of billions right now. So pretty amazing things have happened. So it's not impossible to do it. It's not impossible to win the lottery either, but you have a lot better chance of building your own company and making money. A little ancient history. I started my first company back in 1978. It was called Lexicon Corporation, and we invented the first handheld language translator. We ended up not being well enough capitalized. We sold it to a German company. The only good thing about that, though, was through this German company, they had a Massachusetts operation, and I met my wife there because she was in the marketing department. So that was a plus. So anyway, we were never super successful, although we did come up with some great products at Lexicon. We were one of the first companies in credit card authorization terminals. We worked in a number of other areas. But because of a lack of capitalization, it was like spinning wheels. You know, I made some money at it, and we were successful, and we hired a lot of people in South Florida, but I never really had the giant breakthrough. So I sold that company in 1993 after 15 years there. And I sold it to a company that now is called Florida Gaming Corporation, which owns the Miami High Life fronton and is involved in the casino business. So anyway, I was, for the first time since graduating from college in 1993, I was unemployed. I figured, okay, now what? So I decided I'm going to have to go out and look for a job because you know, I had some money, but not enough to last forever. So I started sending my resume out, and I sent it out to executive recruiters, to venture capitalists. I sent it everywhere I could think of. And I didn't get a single good response, not one that I was interested in. And I said, you know what? I think I'm unemployable. And I figured at that point, I better come up with something. If I'm going to be successful, I need an idea. I need to start something on my own. And this is 1993. And the idea that hit me, it was really because of America Online. America Online and Prodigy at that time were the main online services, and CompuServe. They were dial-up services. Each one of them had about 1 million subscribers. And I was a Prodigy user. I used to check stock quotes and all that. But what happened with AOL in '93, they went public, and their stock went way up. They started putting a lot of people on. And I said, you know, this is pretty interesting. And I never heard of the internet. But I saw that what they were doing in Prodigy and CompuServe, I said, look, eventually everybody is going to be online. I didn't visualize what it would become, but I felt like everybody would be online. And I like sports. I thought, well, if everybody's going to be online, there could be some good vertical categories. So I decided on sports. And I checked all of those services. None of them were doing a very good job. I watched the bowl games on January 1st, and I went on those sites. And I guess nobody was working on those holidays because they weren't updating anything. All the stories were still pre-game stories. So that was really the impetus for SportsLine. So just to let you know how raw this startup was, I had no contacts in sports, no contacts in media, no contacts in venture capital. I never sold any advertising. I never sold any subscriptions. So it was, and I had no partners, and I had nobody with me. So I figured I'd better do some market research and try to do some sort of a business plan for this. So I ran an ad in the Wall Street Journal looking for a collaborator. And I figured I might have to find somebody else that's unemployed because nobody's going to leave a real job for this. So I ran this ad, and I got a bunch of responses. And the one that I ended up interviewing the guy, he said he was a University of Mississippi graduate. And he was about 6'6", and weighed about 280 pounds. He played football for Ole Miss. And he was a real estate salesman. So he sent me the most literate response to the advertisement. And in it he said, I don't know anything about this stuff, but I have a burning desire to succeed. I said, okay, this sounds like my kind of guy. So I brought him in, and he actually did a hell of a job. And he became actually pretty successful in a number of other companies after us. But just the two of us, we sat in the lobby of the Westin Hotel at Cypress Creek Road, and we planned this whole thing out over about a 2 or 3 month period. And I was financing it myself. I brought in an engineer to develop a prototype, and we kind of plagiarized some software. We took a CD-ROM that the Sporting News had put out that had video and all kind of other stuff. But we put it into our prototype. You know, back then on the internet, you couldn't even do video. And nobody even knew really what the internet was. So he built a prototype, and it was on a 20-pound portable computer that I had to carry all over the place to try to raise money. So the first thing, I needed to raise capital, and I thought, let's do a private placement, raise $2 million, $100,000 increments. So I got started on that path, and it completely struck out. And we were to the point, you know, I was starting to exhaust our savings. I said to my wife, maybe this isn't the right thing. And she said, I don't care if you spend every dime, do it, you know, because it's a good idea. And You know, fortunately I did. I listened to her more than a few times I have, but I wish I had more eyes. She's in the back, by the way. And so anyway, a friend of mine came in, and I showed him what we were doing. He says, you know, you need a gorilla here. You need a guy who can introduce you to sports contacts and give you some credibility and all that. So another guy that was in the room too said, you know, I know Joe Namath's agent. So the next day I called Joe Namath's agent, and he was a real brash guy, but he said he'd listened to the pitch and the whole thing. So he came down, and I met with him, and then he had Joe come in, and Joe liked it, and he said, okay, Joe will come in, but only if you get the $2 million raised. But I can take you to New York, introduce you to a bunch of my friends, and maybe we get the deal done. So I go up there with him. We meet with 10 different guys in one day. We have dinner at that night with a guy who doesn't know anything about sports. He's a friend of Tom Jones, the singer, and you know, he's just, I thought, the biggest waste of a meeting of the whole thing. So his name was Burke. And so Burke, his business was manufacturing artificial Christmas trees. And Walmart and Kmart were his biggest customers. So anyway, we go through that whole meeting. The next day, Jimmy Walsh, Joe's agent, calls me up and he says, look, Burke is interested. But he's only interested if he can do the whole $2 billion. And so, you know, so it looked like the tide was turning. So we ended up going to a big meeting with Burke's attorneys. And you have to understand this guy. He didn't own a single stock. He had $100 million in CDs. He never bought any stocks. So anyway, we get into this room with his lawyers, his accountants, my lawyer, Jimmy Walsh, and he tells his lawyers, he says, look, he said, I don't want you guys to do any due diligence on this company, because you'll talk me out of investing. The only thing I want to be sure of is if this guy dies, I get my $2 billion back. So that was the whole negotiation, was to try to figure out how to get the insurance done, so that if it went into a bankruptcy, the money wouldn't go to the company. So anyway, that's when we really got started in earnest, and this was in late '94. So I went out and tried to hire a chief technology officer. I had an executive recruiter, was striking out everywhere, but we found a guy actually that worked for Apple Computers out in Cupertino. They were trying to do an online service, and I think he was maybe felt like he would never get to the point he wanted to be at Apple, but he turned out to be the best hire I made back in those days, because he really knew his stuff, and he also knew how to talk the talk. He could convince people that we would have the technical ability to get the job done. So he and I ended up, I don't know if you guys remember, but in late '94, there was really no commercial internet. Netscape had just been formed. They were letting you download browsers. But even if you had the browser, you had to have an internet service provider, and there weren't any good internet service providers. So it's still pretty much in its infancy. But we did decide that Netscape was a pioneer here, and that we should get to know him. So we cold called Jim Barksdale, who had just come in as CEO of Netscape, and he agreed to meet with us. So I went out to California with my CTO, and we met with the Netscape guys. And they said, look, we are going to need some content companies on the internet. It turns out that ESPN is doing exactly what you're doing, and they're further ahead than you guys, which I didn't know. And said that their company, a company that's doing their work for them is a company called Starwave. And Starwave is backed by Paul Allen. And they're loaded with Sun Microsystems engineers. But we think there's room for another player. And we can't partner with them because they don't need our help. So we'd like to talk to you about doing your whole technology back end. And he said, just as we were getting ready to close the meeting, he said, by the way, would you like to meet our venture capitalist, who was Kleiner Perkins? So, you know, they didn't turn me down twice for geographic reasons, but because Jim Barksdale had set up the appointment, I was able to get into Kleiner Perkins. And the guy I was supposed to meet with was the venture capital guy that was on the board of Citrix down here, Kevin Compton. The day I went in for the meeting, Kevin wasn't there. So they had one of the biotech guys meet with me, a guy named Joe Lacob. Well, it turned out Joe had never done anything in the computer area, but he was the biggest sports fan in Kleiner Perkins. Half those guys like John Gorham and Oak Koshler didn't know anything about sports. So anyway, Joe took a real interest in it, and he kind of pushed it to the next level there. If you don't know, Joe Lacob today is the owner of the Golden State Warriors. So he's done pretty well for himself too. But anyway, it was great to get them into the picture. We wouldn't have done it without Netscape. And you know, when you think about it, I want to talk a little more about, when I get to the advice section here, about venture capitalists. It's hard to get in to see them, but if you have somebody they're working with, and you could potentially benefit that company, it's going to make your job easier in raising money from them. So I think that was a pretty big deal for us. By the way, they wanted us to move to California. That was going to be one of the terms of the deal. So when we're negotiating the pricing, a guy named Vinod Koshla, who is really one of the most famous venture capitalists out there, was there to negotiate the pricing with me. And he said, look, you have to move out here because we need to be near you, and we'd like you to be here. So he just has that meeting with me, and then I go through the next 2 months of getting the contracts done and working with Joe Lacob. And because I became friendly with Joe, I convinced him we should stay in Florida. So I guess right after Kleiner invested, I went out there and I'm in a breakfast meeting with John Gorham, Oak Koshla, and Joe Lacob. And nobody had told Vinod, so he asked me, he said, when are you guys moving out here? I had to tell them that we were not. Anyway, with Kleiner in the deal, it gave us credibility. And that was the most important thing. We could start hiring. They put in $3 million, so now I had raised $5 million. So they put in $3 million. I was able to start hiring and bringing people in. And because Kleiner was such a big name, they backed Amazon and Google and Sun Microsystems and all the rest of these guys. America Online too. So because they were involved, now I could start hiring people that were actually employed, which made a big difference. So I recruited the president of sales from Turner Sports. I recruited Ross Levinson, who was the #2 guy at HBO Sports. He was most recently the interim CEO of Yahoo, and now he's the CEO of Guggenheim Media Partners. So, we had some pretty good alumni out of SportsLine. So, anyway, we went on and developed the product. We were ready to launch on August 15th, and we did a really big press conference in New York at the Waldorf. And all this time during '95, I had been meeting with the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, the PGA Tour, and getting to know them. And I also had the specter of ESPN right there with us. They were going right along with us at the same time. So we had this press conference, and we had Bob Costas was our keynote speaker. Now, Jim Barksdale had just taken Netscape public 2 weeks before, and Netscape now, because it got so much publicity and the stock went up so high, it made the internet almost a household word at that point. Then everybody knew, hey, the internet's really here. So Jim Barksdale actually flew in from California to be one of our keynote speakers. So part of what we did leading up to the official release, we had a beta release, and we were giving away as a promotion every single day a Joe Namath football to anybody who registered. And so we gave away about 75 footballs. And the interesting thing about it is we didn't know how much we would charge for the service. A bunch of us sat in the room, well, what do we charge? So we're thinking $4.95 a month or $39.95 for the year. So once we had the press conference, we put this pay package in. Now, even back then, we had 50,000 people sign up for a chance to win a Joe Namath football. We announced the pricing at the press conference. Every one of those 50,000 left. So we said, okay, that's another thing you'll learn. Your original plans might not work out the way you want, so you have to think about something else. Okay, so later in the year, ESPN is making a big splash. They're being promoted on television. We don't have a television partner, and we're running out of cash. So I call up, I'm trying to raise money, and I've got a bunch of guys that are interested, but I'm not going to be able to do it in time. So Kleiner Perkins sent a couple of guys out to meet with me, and the guy Doug McKenzie was one of them. And they came in conveniently when the Dolphins were playing the 49ers on a Monday night football game. So the meeting was on Monday afternoon. And their advice to me was, just scale back, be a search engine for sports, it won't cost as much money, and that's the way it should go. So of course I was against that, completely. And we went to the game that night. I got to be pretty good friends with Doug McKenzie, and the 49ers won, thank goodness. He was in a good mood. And Kleiner agreed with my strategy to go forward. And not only that, they loaned us $1.5 million. They made that decision the next day. In February, we raised $11 million for Reuters, New York Life, a bunch of others. And later that year, we raised another $16 million in venture capital with US West as our main backer. And that was a funny story in itself, too, because we had Goldman Sachs lined up as a $16 million deal, and Goldman was coming in for 8 of it. And US West, a guy there called me. He said, we want to come in and meet with you. We'd like to participate in the round. I said, okay, well, maybe we can get you some of it. I had it pretty much sold out, but he said, we'll take anything. If you give us $1 million or $2 million, whatever it is, we'd like to come in. So while they were there, I get a call from the guy at Goldman Sachs, and he says, we just got through with our review, and we were going to have to lower your valuation. I said, well, let me call you back. And I got the US West guys there. I said, you guys want to do the $8 million? He said, let us make a call. They come back and they decide to come in for the $8 million. You never know. One thing for sure, when you're an entrepreneur, two things you don't do. You never take no for an answer. Number one. And number two, you have to ask for stuff, right? Nobody's going to give you anything if you don't ask. Sometimes you get surprised. Most of the time you don't get the answer you want, but once in a while you do. So anyway, we were still getting killed by ESPN. But we did one major deal that summer in '96. We signed up Shaquille O'Neal. And Shaq was really popular then, and he was still playing for Orlando, but the word was that he was going to go to the Lakers, so he was big news. So we had this press conference in New York, and the whole room was filled with TV cameras, everything else. It was our first national television exposure. And Shaq made a big difference to us, and the internet continued its popularity. And the day before Thanksgiving in '96, we went up and met with Sean McManus, who was just taken over as CEO or president of CBS Sports. And I knew Sean because he was with IMG prior to that. And we were using IMG for some marketing support. So Sean got in there, and we actually were able to cut a deal with CBS. It took forever to put it together. We closed it in March of '97. And that was really the point where I'd say, okay, we've got it made at this point. We closed it 2 days ahead of the NCAA basketball tournament. And I don't know if you know, in sports, the first 2 days are the busiest days at the internet for sports because you've got 16 games each day. And back then, you couldn't really watch but one game in your area. And everybody's at work, so they can't watch it, period. So they're banging on the internet all day long to keep up with the scores. And it was great. We really started to roll. And after that, because now we had not only strong financial backing, but we had CBS in there, and we're guaranteed that we're going to be promoted on TV. That's when we were able to sign up guys like Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, and a number of others to be partners with us. And that got us a lot of other publicity. And then late '97 led to our IPO. And again, the IPO was supposed to go out at about $12 a share. And I don't know if you know what these road shows are like, but it's a 3-week deal. We had to go to Europe. We were in every city of the United States, and it's just crazy stuff to go through. And at the very end, the market for NASDAQ stocks was getting killed. And it was questionable whether we get the deal done or not. I can remember we finished our last meeting in Denver, and we're in the limo, and it's snowing, and we're parked near the airport, and we have a conference call. Well, the way these conference calls work is your investment bankers and your attorneys and the accountants and everybody else is online. So there's like 30 people on the call. And Fidelity, it turned out, was going to be our biggest buyer in the IPO. And they set the price, basically. And we had to take $8. So, of course, we were disappointed, but, you know, there's another rule of entrepreneurship. If you're offered the money, you better take it. You know, the only mistakes I've made is not taking it, and then later it's impossible to get. So we took the $8, it's $32, and I get my first meeting with Mel Karmazin, who is a real tough guy. He'd just taken over as president of CBS. And I go into his office, and he says, you know, we had done the deal. It was basically a deal where they got stock at SportsLine for a certain amount of promotion. So I go in and he says, you know, I've been really dying to meet you, because you got to be a great salesman, the way you screwed CBS in this deal. He says I'm over delivering advertising, and I want to know what you're going to do about it. I said, well, look, you have stock in a public company. He says, yeah, $8 a share. What good is that? I said, well, what number will make you happy? He says 30. So anyway, right after the first of the year, internet stocks started to move up. This is 98. By the end of January, we were at about 18 or 19. And by mid-February, we were at 26. Our investment banker said, look, the market's going up. Everything's looking good. We should do a secondary offering and get out some of the early shareholders and some of that. So we went on the roadshow again. We were at about 28, 29. We ended up closing that deal at 37 5/8. And it was just, this was 4 months later from the IPO. So anyway, Mel Karmazin still wasn't completely happy, but he was in a better mood than he was before. So after that, we were able, in the long term, to take away some stuff from ESPN. They had NFL.com. We were able to get NFL.com away from them. We did PGA Tour.com and several others. And what we did really that was better than anybody else, including ESPN, was we came up with the best fantasy football platform. And we were the only ones that really were able to charge for it. We made it free at first, just so we could get a lot of people to sign up. It's one of the best marketing decisions we ever made, because in giving it away free for 2 years, we had millions of users, and when we decided to start charging, we had a retention of over 40% because they liked the product. So it really turned out to be good. Plus, we were able to sell a lot of advertising for fantasy. That's really the most interesting part of the story. You know, we went on after that. We sold to CBS down the road in 2004. They're still here. You know, they're on Cypress Creek Road, CBS Digital Media, all the sports handled out of there. And they still have over 200 employees here in Fort Lauderdale. So I think that was a pretty good success for the area. And thank you. And again, just mentioned Ross Levinson was one of our, I'm proud of the alumni. Yeah, I'm proud of a couple of things. I'm proud of that it's a company that's going to go forever. CBSSports.com will be around forever. Over here on Cypress Creek Road, a lot of those engineers are guys I hired in '95 that are still there. You know, so quite a few employees that worked for us way back are still there. And the success of a lot of the people that left was pretty outstanding. I mentioned Ross Levinson. He's really done well at Yahoo and now at Guggenheim. Tom Eriks was our New York sales. He was the head of our New York sales operation. He became head of sales for Facebook. Recently retired. I don't know how much he made, a lot. He was a 30-something employee of Facebook. And a lot of other guys are CEOs of their own companies today. I got to know everybody in the business. I knew Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban came down to Fort Lauderdale to meet with us at SportsLine to figure out how we could collaborate on some things. And all of them, Jeff Bezos, all of these guys will really cover this. This is pretty interesting. They shot this picture in one of the buildings at the Presidio in San Francisco. You can see Jeff Bezos is there, Jerry Yang, a bunch of these guys. Steve Forbes' yacht was there. Steve Forbes was there. We all went out on his yacht that night. I thought it was a pretty cool experience. So let's get to the advice part of this thing. I think that You need to have, of course, a solid concept when you get started. You need to get some early collaborators. They're not going to be the guys that you're going to ultimately, you're going to get stronger people as you go, but you need people who you can work with and can help you build a concept to raise money. You know, you need a solid technology guy, for sure. Even if you're going to farm out technology, you need somebody to be in charge of it that works for you. And you need a good business plan. The first money is not so hard to get if you have a good concept. You can raise some angel financing. The thing is you have to keep improving, because the next round, maybe you step up to venture capital, but you know, you have to be on plan to do that. There's nothing harder than raising that second money when you're not doing well. You know, so you need to be flexible, you need to move forward on that. You need to establish contacts. Now, like I said, I didn't know anybody in sports or media or, you know, venture capital or anything else. So I had to do a lot of cold calling. You have to be prepared to do that. You have to try to find people that do know these people. Like when I brought in IMG as a marketing partner, I didn't know anybody there, but I knew a guy who was doing a deal with IMG. And he introduced me, and I got to know Mark McCormick, who at that time was considered the most powerful man in sports. And, you know, he was able to introduce us to the television networks and to other people. So you just have to keep working on it. But, you know, it's hard to get there without these connections. I would say after you get started and you're on the move here, that you really need to concentrate on getting a good venture capitalist. And if possible, you get a Silicon Valley venture capitalist. They like their companies to be out there, but Citrix proved that you didn't have to be out there, and we proved that you didn't have to be out there. You know, you could be here and be successful. There are a lot of advantages to being here. But one thing, it's very expensive out in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. The rents are through the roof. The engineers make an absolute fortune there. And, you know, and it's tough to keep them. You know, we were lucky here. We had to bring in a lot of engineers when we first started SportsLine. But the good thing was that there weren't 100 other companies on the next block that could hire them away. You know, so once they committed, they come here with their families, we pretty much have them. And a lot of them, like, as I said, are still over there. The VCs, there's something you should know about. The big ones like Kleiner Perkins, Sequoia, Benchmark, Accel, some of the rest. They don't look at business plans that you send them. You could send, you know, I've talked to a number of these guys that have said, I have never once even opened the cover of an unsolicited business plan. You have to have somebody put you in front of these guys. In my case, it was Jim Barksdale at Netscape. But you know, some of the things you can do to prepare yourself is get some of these publications online, like VentureBeat and some of these others that will let you know who different venture capital firms are backing. If you could find somebody that has some business synergistic to what you're trying to do, and you get to know these people, and they can make the introductions to their VCs, you have a chance. But you have to have an introduction. It's very, very, very difficult and unlikely that you get money from them if you don't. And I would say also that how important the venture capital guys are. They give you credibility. You know, they give you the credibility. First of all, they have plenty of money, and they're prepared. They know that the money they give you in the first round is not going to be enough. They're going to have to do a second, third, and fourth, and they're going to need to be there for that. Second, third, and fourth rounds that you do, because you had you know, a rock in there like Kleiner or Sequoia or Accel, people, other venture capital companies like the financial guys like New York Life or in our case Reuters and some of the others, they'll come in without doing so much due diligence because they can believe on the due diligence that was done by the VC. And again, I would never sell that short. Kleiner helped us in so many ways. I doubt we would have ever been successful without them. They made introductions. They used to have a conference every summer in Aspen where they would invite all their CEOs and all their partners would be there. I went to a party, not a party, but a little get-together at Jim Barksdale's house in Aspen, where Jeff Bezos was there, Steve Case from AOL was there, and a couple of other guys. I walked out of there with a deal with Amazon, a deal with Excite, a deal with AOL. You know, these things would have never been possible. So anyway, that's about it for now. I think I'm speaking at one of your events over the next few weeks. I hope I hope that you guys will get in there, make this work, and come up with some things. In fact, if you have a good enough idea, give me a call. You can check out some of my stuff